Hello friends, welcome in today's lecture. Today we will see what is the URL format, URL class and URL connection. First see what is the URL. For identifying the documents on the internet, the uniform or universal resource locator, that is a URL, is used. There is variety of URL depending upon the type of resources. Java URL class presents in the java.net package and that deals with the URL, that is a uniform resource locator, which uniquely identify or locate resources on the internet. So mainly use of the URL is to identify the particular document on the internet. URL is a stand for Uniform Resource Locator and it represents resources on the World Wide Web such as a web pages or FTP directory. The class URL represents the Uniform Resource Locator and that points to it is a pointer that refers to the resources on the World Wide Web. And the resources is nothing but the file or any directory, or it can be a references to a query to the database or the search engine. See the URL format. The general form of URL format is http://www.study2night.com:80/index.html. See, in URL format there are 4 parameters. First is protocol, second host name, third port number and fourth file name. So first HTTP, it is a protocol. www.study2night, it is a host name. 80 is a port number and index.html, it is your file name. So URL format is developing using the 4 parameter: protocol, host name, port number and file name. So the URL contains the many information like protocol, host name, file name and port number. See what is the mean by protocol. Protocol, it is any protocol, that is a HTTP, FTP, HTTPS. Many of the protocols. HTTP is nothing but the hypertext transport protocol is a convention here, and HTTP, HTTPS, FTP and file are the some examples of the protocol. Second parameter is host name, or is also called as a server name. It is nothing but the name of the server machine on which the resources are present. Third is file name. The way means the file name, it is the name to be the record on the machine. Means your file is located on our machine and the name of the file is present in the file name. And fourth parameter is port number. Port number is the number through which the URL connect to the web page. If the URL does not specify any specific port, then the default port number is used. So these 4 are the URL format. Means when developing a URL format, the 4 parameter is considered. Now see the various methods in the URL class, and these 4 methods are commonly used in the Java program when developing or performing a URL class program. First method is get protocol. The get protocol method is used or it returns the name of the protocol which is typically used. Generally HTTP protocol is being used. Means many of the protocol is there, but generally the HTTP protocol is mainly used. Second method is get port. This method returns the port number, and for the HTTP port number is 80. Third method is get host. The get host method returns the host name. And fourth method is get file. The get file method returns the name of the file which we want to access. Means which file we want to access, that file name is present in the, or it return the that file name by using the method getFile. So in the URL class, total 4 method is mainly commonly used in the Java programming. Other method is also available, but this 4 method is commonly used: get protocol, get port, get host, and get file. Now see some other URL class methods. The other methods is, first one, public string, toString. The toString method returns the given URL object in the string form. Second method is string getPath. This method returns the path of the URL and it returns the null if the URL is empty. Means when you want to the particular path of the URL, that time the getPath method is used. Third method is getQuery. This method gives a query part of the URL. A query is a part of the URL after the question mark in the URL. Fourth method is getAuthority. This method returns the authority part of the URL and it returns the null if it is in an empty. Fifth method is getHost. This method gives the host name associated with the URL in the IPv6 format. Sixth method is getFile. We already discussed the getFile method. This method returns the file name of the URL. Seventh method is getPort. This method returns the port number of the URL. Eighth method is getDefaultPort. This method returns the default port number used by the URL. Ninth method is getRef. This method returns the reference to the URL object, and the reference is the part of the represented by the hash in the URL. 10th method is getProtocol. The getProtocol method returns the associated protocol associated with the URL. These 10 are the methods of the URL class. See what is the use of the URL, or what is meant by the URL class. URL class represents a uniform resource locator or a pointer that refers to the resources on the World Wide Web. A resources can be a file or the directory, or it can be a references to the query, to the database or the search engine. So Java URL class is a gateway to access the resources on the web. The object of the java.net URL class represents the URL, and that object manages all the information present in the URL string. There are many methods in the Java URL class to create an object of the URL class. See, URL class is mainly used to point or refer the resources on the World Wide Web. You want access any type of a website or any information, you must need to know the URL of the particular site. See some constructor of the URL class. There are total 6 constructors of the URL class. First is URL having one parameter string spec, that is a specification. Second constructor is URL having 4 parameter string protocol, string host, int port and string file. Third constructor is URL having the parameter is string protocol, string host, int port, string file and URL stream handler. Fourth constructor is URL having 3 parameter string protocol, string host and string file. Fifth constructor is URL having 2 parameter URL context and string specification. Sixth constructor is URL context, string specification, URL stream handler. These 6 are the constructors of the URL class. See one by one the constructor. First is URL string address throws malformed URL exception. It creates a URL object from a specified string. The Java URL class have various constructors, and these all constructors throws the exception malformed URL exception. Okay, so first constructor creates a URL objector from a specified string or address. Second constructor is URL string protocol, string host and string file. It creates a URL objector from a specified protocol, host and file name. Third constructor is URL string protocol, string host, import, string file. This constructor creates a URL objector or instance from a protocol, host, port and file name. Fourth constructor is URL having parameter, URL context and string specification. This constructor creates a URL objector by parsing the given specification in the given context. Fifth constructor is URL string protocol, string host, int port, string file and URL stream handler. This constructor creates a URL objector or instance from the specified protocol, host, port number, file and handler. And last one, sixth constructor is URL having parameter, URL context, string specification, URL stream handler. This constructor creates a URL by parsing a given specification with the specified handler within a specified context. So these are the 6 constructors of the URL class. So this all about your URL format and URL class and its methods. Now see one example of the URL class. See, this is an example of the URL. First import the package, import java.net.star. Then create a class URL demo. Public static void main string args throws malformed URL exception. Then create an object of the URL hp is equal to new URL and pass the URL of a particular site. Here I am passing http msbt.org.in. Then print system.out.println protocol plus here we use the get protocol method. So get protocol method returns the protocol name. Then next we use the method get port. The get port method returns the port number of the particular URL. Third method here we use get host. The host name is written by using the method get host. And get file method returns the file name of the URL. And last system.out.println external form hp.toExternal form. Then save the code url demo.java and then compile the code. First compile the code java c program name url demo.java. See here it is successfully compiled. Then run the code java program name url demo. See here this is the output of our URL demo program. First protocol name is http, then port is -1, then host is msbt.org.in. Here external form http msbt.org.in. Here the port number -1 is represent or it indicates that it is not set explicitly. So that's why the port number is displayed -1. This is the sample program of the URL. Now see the next. Next is a URL connection. The class URL connection is used for accessing the attributes from remote resources. Means URL connection class is used for accessing the attribute of the remote resources, and these attributes are exposed by the HTTP protocol. The URL connection class contains many methods that allows the communication or communicating with the URL over the network. So URL connection provides many methods for communicating with the URL over the network. So you perform the URL programs, that time your machine should be in a network or connected to the network. The URL connection class is a Java, means URL connection supports the or access the remote resources. The URL connection class in Java helps to represent the connection or communication between the application and the URL. This class also helps us to read and write the data to specified resources of a URL. Java.NET URL connection is an abstract class whose subclasses represent the various types of the URL connections. So once a client makes a connection to the remote resources, the role of URL connection class is start, and the instance of the URL connection class examines the properties of the remote object and that transporting it locally. So this class is an abstract class and it accesses the remote resources. The abstract class of a URL connection is a superclass of all the class, and that represents the communication link between the application and the URL. So URL connection class is an abstract class, and this class represents a communication link between the application and the URL. The instance of this class can be used to both read from and write to resources referenced by the URL. The Java URL connection class represents the communication link between the URL and the application, and this class can be used to read and write the data to specified resources referred by the URL. There are two commonly used methods are open connection and connect. So URL connection provides two methods. First is open connection and second is connect. The open connection method returns the object of the HTTP URL connection class if you connect to a URL with the HTTP protocol. Also, this open connection method returns the object of the jar URL connection class if you connect to the URL of a jar file. Means when you connect the URL with the jar file, then we use the jar URL connection and using the open connection method. And also open connection method returns the HTTP URL connection if you connect the HTTP protocol. We can get the object or instance of the URL connection class with the use of the open connection method of the URL class. And the syntax of the open connection method is public URL connection open connection throws IO exception. The URL connection class contains the many methods, but most commonly method is open connection and connect. The connect method is used to make a connection to the remote object. So two methods is there, open connection and connect. Open connection method is used to create a connection object on a URL, and connect method is used to make a connection to the remote object. See some other methods of the URL connection class. First method is get content. This method returns the contents of the URL connection, or it retrieves a content of a invoking object, means particular URL object. Second method is get content encoding. This method returns the value of the content encoding header field in a string form, or also it retrieves the string representing the content encoding of invoking the URL object. Third method is get content length. This method gives a value of the content length header field in the string format. Fourth method is get content type. This method returns the value of the content type in the header field. Fifth method is get last modified. This method gives the value of the last modified header field, or it returns the last modified date. Again, it returns the millisecond since midnight, the January 1, 1970. And sixth method is long get expiration. It returns the value of the expired header field. Seventh method is get modified since. This method returns the value of the object if modified since field. Ninth method is set do input, and it returns the boolean value input. If we pass the parameter true to this field to specify that we will use the connection input. Also, it returns a boolean value of a do input flag of invoking the object. Public void set do output boolean output. This field also returns the boolean value of a do output flag of invoking object. 11th method is public input stream get input stream throws IO exception. This method returns the input stream of the URL connection for reading from a resources. Next method is public output stream get output stream throws IO exception. It returns the output stream of a URL connection for a writing to the resources. And last method is public URL get URL. This method returns the URL that of a particular URL that connected to the URL connection object. Otherwise, it also returns the value of invoking object URL field. So get URL method returns the URL that is connected with the URL connection object. So these 13 are the methods of the URL connection class, and mostly two methods commonly used are open connection and connect method. Now see one example of the URL connection class. See here, this is an example of the URL connection class. First, import the packages. Import java.net.star, import java.io.star, import java.util.arraylist, import java.util.date, import java.util.hashmap, import java.util.list, and import java.util.map. Then create a class URL connection demo. In the main, public static void main string args throws malformed URL exception. In the try block, create an object of the URL is equal to new URL, and pass the URL http mspt.org.in. Then create an object of the URL connection URL con is equal to URL open connection. So here use the open connection method to open a connection to the above particular URL, this URL. Then using a println system statement, print the URL con. It is an object of the URL connection dot get allow user interaction. This is also one of the method of the URL connection. This method returns the boolean value according to the user interaction permission given to the invoking particular URL object. So get allow user interaction method returns the boolean value according to the user interaction permission given to the URL object. Next method is get content type. This method returns the content of the invoking object. Next method is get URL. This method returns the value of invoking URL object. Next method is get do input. This method returns the boolean value of the do input flag that invoking the URL object. Same get do output returns the boolean value of the doOutput flag invoking the URL object. Next method is here use get last modified. This returns the last modified date, and also it takes the midnight date, that is a 1 January 1970, means 1970. And last method is here use get content encoding. This method returns the string representing content encoding of invoking the URL object. So all these are the methods of the URL connection class, and we access this method using the URL connection object. So then next here catch block. If any exception occur in the program, that time catch can throws this exception. So try catch block is used in the program. Now save the code and then compile the code first. javac URL connection demo.java. It is successfully compiled. Then run the code. Java program name URL connection demo. See here, this is the output of our program. First, get allow user interaction. This method returns the true or false value, and it returns the false because user interaction permission, it depends on the user interaction permission. Next is get content type. Here return the type text or HTML. Next method is get URL. This method returns the URL, and our URL is http://mspt.org.in. Then next method is get do input and get do output. This method returns the true and false value depending upon the URL. Next method is get last modified. Here the last modified date is January 1, 1970. And last get content encoding. Here get content encoding method returns the null value, means it represents the encoding of the URL. So this is the output of our program. And when you run the URL connection program or network related program, your machine should be in a network or your machine is connected to the network.